everyone, and welcome back to Revisiting. For the past year, I've been slowly playing through a catalog of games belonging to a developer I frankly should have dived into much earlier in my life. Treasure. If you are into retro video gaming, you most likely have heard of Treasure at some point for titles such as Sin and Punishment, Ikaruga, Guardian Heroes, Dynamite Headdy, Alien Soldier, and the list goes on. Treasure is often regarded as one of the best third-party developers to ever do it, with the amount of classic titles under their belts. And of course, like everything else, Treasure had to have had started somewhere, and that is with Konami. Now, take this with a grain of salt, but rumor has it that the future Treasure staff was working on original game ideas while also working at Konami. However, Konami would reject their ideas. Frustrated, the staff left the company. They went on to pursue their idea and wanted to bring it to the Sega Genesis for its performance qualities. However, Sega would also reject their proposals until the newly formed company Treasure had been working with them on a McDonald's licensed game. This original idea had formed up to be their debut title by only 13 days. Gunstar Heroes, the game I would like to focus on today. It is, of my opinion, that Gunstar Heroes is one of the greatest video games ever made, and the best debut title by a video game company. I hope that by the end of this video, my love for this game will carry across the screen and cause you to play this game for yourself. Gunstar Heroes is a 2D side-scrolling run-and-gun shooter that combines an immense atmosphere of action with sometimes bizarre yet charming humor, the latter of which is something I think players of all backgrounds will love. Instead of treating its game very seriously, like other titles would at the time, Treasure realizes that they could do so much more, and made the game very memorable with some of the silly content they put into the game. Like, there's this boss Melon Bread that is literally a smiley face, and does nothing. It's a big, goofy set piece Treasure uses to show off their 3D technology capabilities with the Sega Genesis. And then there is Papaya Dance, which is an asparagus that shoots out spores when hit. The bigger, yellowish-white spores birth giant caterpillars. Treasure even does little stuff, like in the background of the Blackbeat Stepper boss fight, there is just a cow hanging out. It's such a small detail, but it's really funny. It's like, what's it doing there? Of course, you can't have an action game without action, and Treasure really knows how to deliver. The amount of explosions in the game is insane. Treasure really goes all out on just blowing things up. It seems like anything will just go up in flames. And the amount of enemies Treasure is able to put on the screen at a time is truly something to behold. The odds do seem like they are overwhelmingly stacked against you. The soundtrack fits the game very well. The music is fast and filled with lots of percussion and horns to give off the feeling of ever-going excitement. Of course, none of this action would work well if it didn't look good. Gunstar Heroes' sprite work holds up exceptionally well and displays everything very clearly. I showed this game to a friend this year, and he thought it was a modern independent game. That's how good the quality is. But how about how the game controls? An action game has to feel good. The controls for Gunstar Heroes can be a little complex. However, once you learn the ropes, you'll find yourself unable to put the game down. As a side-scrolling run-and-gun shooter, you can move around and jump. There are also moments where you may need to grab something or swing down a ledge. These kinds of actions require a button combination to be executed. There is also a blocking action put into the game, but that is so convoluted to pull off, and the action itself is unnecessary, so I wouldn't worry about learning it. The characters you play as also know martial arts, so they can punch, kick, and jump off of walls. The movements feel really fluid, so you'll find yourself air diving just for the fun of it. The weapon system of Gunstar Heroes is easily one of the best parts of the game. I love it so much, I tried mimicking it for my college senior project, No Robot. Here's how the system works. The system at its base is made up of 4 base weapons: the Force, the lightning, the chaser, and the fire. Each of these weapons, on their own, have their own unique properties, advantages, and disadvantages. However, the game starts getting much more interesting once you pick up another weapon, as instead of outright replacing the weapon you previously had, rather, the weapon you picked up will be put into a second slot, and the properties of both your weapons will be merged together to create a whole new weapon. You can mix and match at any time, double up on your weapon type, or even disable one of your slots to use one of the base weapons. This system allows for such a level of replayability within Gunstar Heroes that it ends up almost defining the experience itself. I really love it. As for going through the game itself, Gunstar Heroes is structured a lot like a Mega Man game, where at the start, you can pick freely between 4 levels. Then, once they're all beaten, the game gets more linear. There is even a boss gauntlet of all of the masters near the end of the game. Each level offers a different kind of experience. But before we get into the specifics for the levels in the game, it's best to go over the narrative of the game first. It should be noted that the storylines between the Western and the Japanese versions are very different. For the sake of time, I'll try to compress it down as much as possible. The story is basically about the Gunstar army on the planet Gunstar 9, fighting the evil empire which already is in possession of all of the mystical crystals needed to wake a god of ruin, and the resistance on the verge of collapse. This has you starting out with a high level of stakes, and makes the fight all the more present and satisfying. Your goal as Gunstar Red and Gunstar Blue is to go through each of the 4 initial levels and retrieve the mystical crystals from the masters of the evil empire that hold them, with the help of your mentor, Dr. Brown, and sister, Gunstar Yellow. Getting back to the levels of the game, I'll go through the first 4 levels in the order I normally play them in. Again, you can play these in any order you want. First is Black's level. Black is a slimy, cowardly character with slicked back hair, dark sunglasses, and a suit. His boss fights are all him in a robot, as to avoid direct confrontation with you. Black's level, the Dice Palace, is very creative. First, you'll approach the palace, fighting hordes of low-level enemies off. Each level will also have you fight a stronger grunt known as a Phantom. These guys can throw you around and deploy bombs. Once you get to the board game portion of the level, you throw around a die containing the numbers 1 through 3. Whatever number the die lands on decides how many spaces your character icon will move on the board behind you. This board is labeled with fight spaces and item spaces. The challenge is to get to the end of the board to a space labeled boss, while surviving an onslaught of differing boss challenges. This idea is something I've only seen in one other game, Cuphead. Cuphead seemed like it had some inspiration from Heroes here, and I have no doubt that the Dice King boss was inspired by the Dice Palace here. There are a bunch of great boss fights in this palace. There's this boss, Curry and Rice, that you have to fight with your bare hands. I love how it turns the game on its head, as you can't rely on shooting, and instead must use perfect timing and skill to beat the boss. There is also a fantastic detail to the arena you face this boss in. The background has a few signs that say "No guns allowed," and then behind those, you see a bunch of explosive bombs in storage, implying that they would explode if you were to use your gun. It's absolutely brilliant. Then there's Timeron, which is a very creative boss where time is implemented into its battle. The boss itself will drop bombs until the time below its health reaches 10. Once that happens, the boss will then reverse its actions, with all of the exploded bombs re-exploding in the opposite order they came out in. Thus, you, as a player, have to utilize your memory skills, as well as have Timeron lay bombs in such a way where they're easy to dodge on their second round. There's also the Minion Soldier, which might seem comical at first, but his small size actually makes for a really challenging boss fight, as you have to crouch to even shoot at him. This boss in particular likes to get in close and deal high amounts of damage by grabbing and throwing you, so mobility on your part is key. After you clear the palace, you'll fight Black and his robot vehicle, the Black Beat Stepper, which uses the dice theme of the Dice Palace, and will roll a die containing 1 through 3 to move throughout its box-shaped arena. This arena is color-coded with 4 colors, and whatever color the stepper lands on, decide what attack executes. After black, I deal with Pink's level next. Pink is a selfish character that holds tightly onto her crystal. She is always seen with 2 henchmen that do her fighting for her, but they're so pathetic that they use robots to try to take you down. Pink's stage takes place on what I think is the Resistance Army's home turf, as the stage starts out in the village that is overrun by low-level Empire enemies. After fighting your way through the grunts, you'll climb a pyramid and fight Bravoo Man, which is a boss made entirely out of 3D rendered blocks. He moves slowly and doesn't flinch, and will walk from one end to a stage to another to try to take you out. After this mid-level boss is this awesome set piece where the pyramid explodes and turns into a giant slope that you perpetually slide down while fighting hordes of underlings. After going through a small forest, you'll fight Pink and her henchmen. They're the easiest fight of the masters, so I don't think you should have too much trouble. After a mostly rural stage comes Orange's level. Orange is the strong, beefy master of the Empire, who dresses in army garb and sports a mohawk. He has big muscles and can throw you around quite a bit. He can also summon explosions on command. Orange's stage has a great progression to it, as you start out climbing a vertical building so you can get onto his airship. Then you must fight your way to him, destroying most of the crew in the process. Then, finally the level ends off with you fighting the leader of the Masters, Smash Daisuke, and Orange on a mini helicopter where there isn't much room to move. The whole level is really exciting and makes me feel as if it's an evolution on the Super Mario Bros. 3 airship levels. Finally, there is Green's level, which is the most challenging for me. Green is your brother, who has turned sides and is now working for the enemy. He has slicked back hair, a flowing blue cape, and stands in a cool pose. He comes off as cold, and doesn't seem to care that he is fighting his family. Green's stage is really unique. The entire thing takes place inside of a mine shaft, and you use a special mine cart that can go in between the 2 sides of the stage. The backgrounds of this stage scroll by really fast, giving the stage a sense of momentum. I love the moment in the stage where you fight a train full of underlings. You go from car to car, wiping these guys out. Some of them even have their hands on their hearts before they start shooting at you. Once you beat all the cars, most of the train explodes except for the front car, which has Smash Daisuke and a whole bunch of underlings clinging onto it. There is one underling trying to run to the car on the tracks, while Smash is literally throwing the underlings clinging onto the car at you to try to stop you. The whole exchange is comedic gold. Now when people talk about this game, they always mention the boss of this level, 7 Force, who's a mechanical boss with 7 different forms to it. Each form has its own attack patterns, and it's random what order you fight them in. Luckily, the amount of forms you get depends on the difficulty you choose before you start the game. Easy gives you 3 forms, normal gives you 5, and hard gives you all 7. This boss is definitely one of the hardest. I end up spending a long time trying to beat it, no matter what difficulty I'm on. Specifically, I always have the most trouble with Tails Force, Urchin Force, and Eagle Force. This boss is a perfect enemy to exemplify how excellent the weapon mixing system is in the game. No matter what weapon you have, no combination will fit all of the forms, but on the flip side, there will always be a weapon that will go best against a certain form. It's always so satisfying once you beat this boss. It's like a breath of fresh air. Once you beat a level, you gain 20 additional health points to your base health. Thus, you can go through the levels in an order you want while gaining more health for the tougher levels in the game. That's why I play in the order that I do. I love the little detail of once you beat a level, you go back to the level selection screen, which doubles as your base of operations. The levels are represented through the television screens, and once you beat a level, that television screen will turn off. Meanwhile, above those are these little empty slots. Beating a level will put the crystal you collected from the master in that slot. This visual representation of your progress is great. It's a textbook example of great design. After you beat the initial 4 levels, you'll go through Smash Daisuke's stage. His stage is one big side-scrolling city segment where you face off against all 4 colors of underlings and their phantoms. It's really one great action payoff. It's here where you'll come face to face with the final great soldier, who is the strongest boss of all with his love dancing, which makes even the most hardcore of players cower in fear. After him, you'll fight Smash Daisuke. As a boss, he's pretty tough, especially since his stage can take away a lot of your health. Daisuke has 2 phases, both pretty difficult. The second phase especially is one that I have trouble with because of its homing shots. Daisuke also has a lot of health, showing his strength and status in the Empire. However, there is someone above even him, General Grey. But before you can confront him, he flies away on his battleship with the 4 crystals you've collected, now stolen from you. After this comes the spaceship level. The spaceship level comes out of nowhere, and there is quite a mechanical change to how the game works for this one level. It's my least favorite in the game, especially since if you die once, you have to start the whole level over, and it is very difficult, so I suggest using save states if you can on this level to get through it, especially on difficulties harder than easy. Although, I love how the battleship in the background takes up so much of the frame that space is barely visible. It's also entirely purple, with little squares of yellow as windows, and the entire thing is outlined in green to make it stand out from the background and give it some shine. 7 Force also makes an appearance in the spaceship level as the final assault. Basically, it uses all of its forms at once and switches between them on the fly. As you damage it more and more, 7 Force will switch forms faster and faster, making the fight even more tense until the very end. This spaceship level reminds me a lot of Kirby Superstar's Meta Knight's Revenge, if you've ever played that game. You go around a big flying battleship destroying core components, as well as going inside the ship and fighting specialized enemies. I also saw an underling riding a linked chain of meteors, which reminds me a lot of the bonus levels within a game called Space Harrier, another great game. As mentioned earlier, once you beat 7 Force, you'll make your way onto the ship, going back to the main mechanics of the game. Once there, you'll face more enemies and get to the boss of the stage. The Core Guard system is this great 3-part boss that has the most impressive use of 3D in the game. The entire room looks like it's spinning at a high speed while you're having your fight. The first unit is this core that fires multiple lasers at once. The second unit is a linked chain of spheres that fire blue explosions. The final unit is a running robot made of spheres that throws punches and constantly dips into the background. And the entire fight has the Core Guard system in the background, looming over the fight, making for a very memorable frame of a background. Going back to Kirby Superstar, the Core Guard system fight reminds me a lot of the Galactic Nova Nucleus fight from Milky Way Wishes. There are differences, but I swear Masahiro Sakurai must have been influenced by Gunstar Heroes in some way. Finally, after all that, is the boss gauntlet. The final boss gauntlet is pretty tough. I love that while in the boss gauntlet, all of the main members of the evil empire are down at the bottom of the frame, watching you fight. And as you beat them, the next boss will walk off screen so they can prepare to face you. It's such a great detail. The checkpoints in the boss gauntlet section are pretty harsh, so you've got to perform well on all the bosses unless you want to start the whole thing over again. The second boss fight with Green in the boss gauntlet is almost like you're fighting another you. He's very mobile, and shooting at him head-on will only cause him to block your shots, so it is very important to move around during this boss fight. After your fight with Green is spoiler territory, but you're right near the end, so don't be intimidated. Fight! 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 As I play more and more of Treasure's titles, it becomes increasingly clear that they are one of the most unique and one-of-a-kind developers to have existed. They definitely have their own style of game. Nothing I've played comes close to the experiences that Treasure offers. And it's clear that they cared. A lot. They were always building upon what they had done before, like how there are a couple of bosses from this game that actually make an appearance in Alien Soldier, like Melon Bread and Seven Force. They also expand into new experiences like Mischief Makers and Ikaruga. So, at the end of it all, I see no reason not to give Gunstar Heroes a perfect score. It's a ton of fun on all fronts. I could never forget this game, or mistake it for something else. So, I hope you will pick this game up and experience the magic for yourself. This is an essential experience when it comes to video games, and you owe it to yourself to pick up Gunstar Heroes. And that's all I really have to say for this revisiting. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.